Imagine being so thoroughly roasted in the opening seconds of Prime Minister's questions that you can practically hear the sizzle through the parliamentary broadcast. That's exactly what happened when Kemi Badenoch stood up, locked eyes with Keir Starmer, and delivered a question so brutal it should have come with a health warning. Welcome back to UK Political Insight, where today we're dissecting the moment the Conservative leader asked the Prime Minister about reports that his own MPs are calling him a caretaker Prime Minister. Now, if you're not immediately clocked why that's devastating, let me explain. A caretaker Prime Minister is someone who's just holding the position temporarily until the real leader arrives. It's like being told you're the substitute teacher. Sure, you're technically in charge, but everyone knows you're not really the boss and you'll be gone soon. Calling a sitting Prime Minister a caretaker to his face in Parliament on national television is the political equivalent of asking someone if they're pregnant when they're just bloated. Absolutely savage. The context here is crucial because this isn't coming out of nowhere. Labour's poll ratings have been plummeting faster than my faith in politicians keeping manifesto promises, which, as regular viewers know, is saying something. The honeymoon period, if there ever was one, is well and truly over. The budget landed like a lead balloon with voters. Manifesto promises are being broken left and right, and internally, Labour MPs are reportedly getting restless. Rumors of leadership challenges, whispered conversations in Westminster corridors, briefings to journalists, the full Westminster backstabbing special. So when Badenoch stands up and essentially asks Starmer if his own side thinks he's just keeping the seat warm for someone else, she's poking at a very real, very painful wound. Starmer's response was textbook defensive politician. He insisted his own MPs are very proud, pointing to the budget they just passed, which apparently protected public services and the NHS. Protected is doing some heavy lifting in that sentence. The budget that froze tax thresholds, hammered farmers with inheritance tax changes, and left everyone feeling generally worse off, that budget. But sure, protected. It's the kind of answer that sounds confident if you don't think about it too hard, which, to be fair, is the goal of most political responses. Deny the premise, pivot to an achievement, and hope everyone moves on. Classic playbook stuff. But Badenoch wasn't done. Oh no, she was just warming up. She doubled down, accusing Starmer of having lost control of his party before pivoting to energy bills. The way she framed it was particularly cutting. She said he's being called a caretaker because everyone can see he's lost control of his party, that Labour MPs are so busy trying to replace him they've taken their eyes off the ball. That's not just an attack, that's a full diagnosis of political weakness delivered with surgical precision. She's not just saying he's unpopular, she's saying his own team doesn't respect him and they're actively plotting against him while the country suffers. Brutal doesn't even cover it. Then she went after Ed Miliband, the energy secretary, describing him as someone who wants to recycle himself as leader. Recycle himself as leader. That's proper witty parliamentary combat right there. It's a double hit, mocking Miliband's green energy credentials with the recycling reference, while simultaneously suggesting he's yesterday's news trying for a comeback. Miliband, if you remember, was Labour leader before Corbyn, lost the election in 2015, did the awkward resignation, and has been waiting in the wings ever since. The idea that he might fancy another go at the top job isn't completely absurd, which makes Badenoch's jab land even harder. She then challenged Starmer on Miliband's claim that he cut families' energy bills by £300, asking how much energy bills have actually fallen since the election. This is smart politics because it forces Starmer to either defend the claim that's questionable at best or throw his energy secretary under the bus. It's a no-win question, which is exactly the kind of question you want to be asking if you're leader of the opposition. Your job isn't to be constructive, it's to make the government look incompetent, and Badenoch was doing that job with flair. Starmer's response was to claim the government had taken £150 from energy bills with the latest budget. Notice how that number is half of what Miliband apparently claimed. Either someone's math is off or someone's lying, and neither option looks good for the government. He then tried to flip it back on Badenoch, pointing out that 3 of her former MPs had defected to reform and asking who's next. It's a decent deflection attempt, turning the question of his own party's loyalty back onto her, but it came across as a bit desperate. When you respond to questions about your leadership by pointing out your opponent's problems, you're essentially admitting you don't have a good answer to the original question. Let's talk about the energy bills issue specifically, because it's a perfect example of how politicians play fast and loose with numbers. The claim that energy bills have been cut by $300 or $150 or any specific number is almost always misleading, because it depends entirely on what baseline you're using, what time period you're measuring, and what you're including in your calculations. Energy prices are affected by global markets, wholesale costs, standing charges, policy decisions, and pure luck. No government can just wave a wand and cut everyone's bills by a fixed amount. What they can do is implement policies that might reduce bills compared to what they would have been under some theoretical alternative scenario. But households don't experience theoretical alternative scenarios. They experience their actual bills, and if those bills are still high or have gone up, no amount of government spin about how they've technically saved you money compared to a worse timeline is going to make anyone feel better. It's like telling someone their house only burned down 80% instead of 100%. Technically an improvement, not exactly cause for celebration. The broader context of this exchange is the Tories presenting a motion calling on Rachel Reeves to apologize for misleading the country about the state of public finances. This is about the famous or infamous, depending on your perspective, $22 billion black hole that Labour discovered immediately after taking office. The Conservatives' position is that Labour made up or exaggerated this black hole to justify tax rises and spending cuts that they wanted to do anyway. Labour's position is that the Tories left the country in financial ruin, and they're just being honest about it. The truth, as usual, is probably somewhere in between, but neither side has any incentive to be nuanced about it. What makes Badenoch's performance at Pmqs interesting is that it represents a shift in her approach. Early on, she was criticized for being too wonky, too detail-oriented, not punchy enough. She'd ask long, complicated questions that gave Starmer too much room to maneuver. But this exchange showed her learning and adapting. The caretaker prime minister question was short, sharp, and devastating. The energy bills follow-up was specific enough to be awkward, but broad enough to be unanswerable. The digs at Miliband and the state of Labour's internal politics were well-timed and effective. She's finding her rhythm, which is bad news for Starmer. The speculation about Starmer's future as Labour leader is genuinely fascinating because he only became prime minister a few months ago. Labour won a massive majority. By any normal measure, his position should be unassailable. But politics isn't normal, and winning an election doesn't mean you've won over your party or the country. Labour's victory was built more on conservative collapse than genuine enthusiasm for Starmer's vision. Turnout was low, their actual vote share wasn't spectacular, and they benefited enormously from the split on the right between Tories and Reform. Now they're in government, the hard part begins, and it turns out people aren't thrilled with tax rises, broken manifesto promises, and general competency issues. The caretaker prime minister framing is particularly dangerous because once that narrative takes hold, it becomes self-fulfilling. If MPs think the leader is temporary, they start positioning for what comes next. They brief against him. They build alternative power bases. They stop worrying about his opinion of them because he won't be around to punish disloyalty. It creates a death spiral where the leader becomes weaker precisely because people think he's weak. Starmer needs to shut this down fast, which means delivering wins, looking decisive, and making any potential challengers think twice. The problem is he's not currently doing any of those things particularly well. Who might replace him if the worst happens? Well, Badenoch helpfully pointed to Ed Miliband, though whether she genuinely thinks he's a threat or just wanted to mock him is unclear. Angela Rayner was the obvious successor until her council tax issues forced her resignation. Rachel Reeves is chancellor, which theoretically puts her in a strong position, but being chancellor during tough economic times is more often a career ender than a career maker. Wes Streeting gets mentioned a lot. He's got profile and isn't afraid of controversy. Yvette Cooper is experienced and competent, but might be seen as too similar to Starmer. The reality is, Labour probably doesn't have an obvious slam-dunk replacement, which is both good news for Starmer's survival chances and bad news for Labour's future. The Tories, on the meantime, are enjoying this immensely. For months, they were the ones in disarray, hemorrhaging MPs to reform, fighting amongst themselves, watching their poll numbers crater. Now they get to sit back and watch Labour implode while the Tories rebuild. Badenoch's job is to exploit every weakness, ask every uncomfortable question, and make Labour look as incompetent as possible. Today's Pmqs exchange showed she's getting better at it. The caretaker prime minister question will haunt Starmer, because even if it's not true, even if his own MPs are totally loyal and he's completely secure, the question has been asked in public and now everyone's thinking about it. Starmer's counterpunch about Tory MPs defecting to reform was decent, but ultimately defensive. Yes, the Tories have lost MPs to reform, and yes, that's embarrassing for them, but the difference is Badenoch wasn't denying it or pretending it's a problem. She's acknowledged the Tories need to win back voters from reform, and that's part of her pitch. Starmer, on the other hand, is trying to pretend everything is fine while his own MPs reportedly call him a caretaker. That's a much weaker position. When your defense is essentially, well, you've got problems too, you've already lost the argument. The energy bills debate will rumble on because it's a perfect political football. It affects everyone. The numbers are complicated enough that both sides can claim to be right, and voters care deeply about it because they see the impact every month when the bill arrives. Labour will keep claiming they've saved people money, the Tories will keep asking why bills are still high,